Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Boom Learning Back to School 2023 Symposium. I am here today with the Boom Learning CEO, Mary Omeg, and she's going to talk about machine learning and AI in quotes, and what it means today and how it can be very useful, actually. I'm going to share a couple of links for you all in the Zoom chat really quick of resources that will help a little bit with following along. And please, I encourage you all to visit the drive and grab the PowerPoint file and the other file, and also visit the link, which Mary will explain in the presentation. I'm also going to paste a couple of questions about AI, which please feel free to talk to us in the chat and discuss this with us throughout the or near the end or in the middle of the webinar. I'm not quite sure what she has planned for you today. But what scares you about AI or machine learning, and what are you excited about AI? And if you want to let us know where you're from, please do. That's always exciting for us as well. Without further ado, I'd love to introduce you to Mary, and she will talk to you about ChatGPT and other AI in learning.
All right. I turned off self view. So then I was like, oh, I can't see myself. Hey, everyone. Welcome. I hope you've had a chance to look at some of the questions. The questions we've got today what are you afraid of with AI? And what are you excited about? Today, I am going to walk you through a presentation on using AI in the classroom and why you should care. So appreciate seeing everyone's comments there. Do continue to share what you know, what you're afraid of, and do that all the way throughout. Quickly, I'm going to set my screen share up here so we can start sharing some resources. So give me a moment. Kyle is going to share a link with you. And that link is going to take you to this Google Drive right here. In that Google Drive, you will find a copy of my keynote. You are welcome to reach out to our marketing team at any time if you want to make a modified version of this to share with your local teams. I'm happy to support you in doing local PD on this topic. I also have included for your reference our internal AI policies. I know a lot of schools need to create policies. And these are the ones we here at Boom Learning use for generative AI and for image AI and for ChatGPT. I didn't give you our code ones because those are a little more complicated and technical, but these are just mostly the types of things you're going to run into the classroom. So you're welcome to download our sample AI policies and use those to inspire your school on developing policies. So those are resources for you. Kyle will provide those in chat. All right, our presentation today is going to cover, is it going away? Anyone know the answer to that? Pretty self-apparent, I think, at this point. Yeah, it's not going away. So no, business has embraced it. We have labor shortages. Business need plus a labor shortage always has meant in our history more automation. And so AI is just one more form of automation we're going to see. Second, how do you talk to it? Well, this is the core of our presentation today. New York Public Schools did an experiment with AI, and their biggest takeaway was that both teachers and students need to be trained on questioning techniques. Talking to AI, again, it's a science and an art. You really do have to train yourself on how to talk to an AI. It's a bit like talking to a middle schooler where you're really trying to, a fourth or fifth grader, where you're really trying to find out what happened. You have to be very precise in your questioning. Open-ended questions don't always get you the answer. So we'll go through a little case study today, and you can see some examples of how to refine your questioning. So let me get up here. There we go. So how you frame a question is really going to affect your results. And I have, so I asked a question of Doll E. I said, display a student using boom cards on a tablet. And this was the first result I got back. So you can kind of see there's a possible student back there, but they look kind of like a college student. And the image there, it's kind of a tablet, but I'm not sure kind of what tablet. And I was thinking more of an iPad. So I said, all right, let's try again. I said, display an elementary school age student. So now I'm getting more precision in what I want for my results. So this is creating generative AI images using boom cards. I put it in quote, hoping maybe it would know what that was. Digital games on an iPad. So now I have a device that maybe looks a little bit more like iPad, not entirely, but the kids in the pictures are at least school aged. So I got some stuff that maybe with some careful editing, I could like crop in an image of my own work if I were trying to make a material. So the question matters. So display an elementary school age student. Then I thought, oh, let's play with rephrasing a little bit. I said, let's display an elementary school age student using speech therapy boom cards on an iPad. So the devices actually got a little bit better this time at looking like an iPad. And some of the made up content actually got a little closer to our product. But you notice the third of the 3 images it demonstrated, it was like, I don't know whether you're talking about physical things or a tablet. So I'm going to give you both. So generative image AI still doesn't quite know what to do with prompts. It's really going to be best used on a database of content you own to help you finesse your own content. And most of us in schools aren't going to have that amount of content to play with. So let's look at one more on the concept of image AI. Oh, sorry, no, that was my last one on image AI. So for the most part, I think image AI is not quite ready for prime time with schools. You could have students upload their own image and attempt to use image AI to edit it, but I don't think it's going to add that much value yet for creating stuff schools could use. It is an interesting way to explore and brainstorm. Like if a student's kind of stuck on doing something in the style of an artist, they could brainstorm with it a little bit saying, show me, you know, clocks in the style of Monet, and see what it comes up with and go, maybe I could create something like that. So it was a brainstorming thing, but I don't think it's going to create great final stuff that's usable for a while. That said, if you have your own database of images, you can do some really cool stuff with it. All right, so now we're going to move to the topic of what you guys are more likely to run into, which is ChatGPT. So with ChatGPT, and I see this is going to be a little tricky on the screen sharing because it is jumped straight to. So I'm going to ask you guys, my presentation is over there in the keynote for you. But in order to demonstrate what I want to about ChatGPT, we're going to have to change the screen share. So give me a moment here. There we go. All right. So now you should be able to see a ChatGPT window. Is that good for everyone? Kyle, everyone seeing a ChatGPT
You're
window?
good. Yep.
Awesome. Okay. And let me do this as, see if I can change this. Nope, it's going to want to take you back into my presentation. So we're going to get a little clever here on how we're using this. We're going to do a little back and forth. Not the funnest, but we'll do it because I need to show you the ChatGPT window. So we're going to play with some questions here. So some of the things when you're framing questions with a ChatGPT, it's really important to be specific if being specific matters. So in my previous example, you notice I said student, and then I was like, oh, wait, I need to specify elementary school age student. So be specific if being specific matters. Next, you need to recognize that AI may not be able to generate specific source-based content. So like it can't go over to boomlearning.com and say, I'm only going to return stuff from boomlearning.com. It doesn't know how to do that. And also word order matters. Computers are very, very literal. So I gave ChatGPT a prompt. I took it straight out of the AP history exam from 2016. And so the question is, evaluate the extent to which the United States participation in the First World War, 1917 to 1918, marked a turning point in the nation's role in world affairs. Explain what changed, what stayed the same from the period immediately before the war to the period immediately following it. Now, this is a very specifically worded question, right? It has time limiters. It has participants, United States. It has a goal, evaluate. It has a specific thing to evaluate, a turning point in the nation's role in world affairs. It asks for specific elaboration, explain what changed, what stayed the same from the period when, immediately before and immediate following. So AP questions are actually a really good example of a question that's going to be framed in a way that generates pretty reliable results. So now we're going to go over here into my US and World War I example. But before we do that, let's look at these little disclaimers here for ChatGPT. You notice it's examples, explain. My example uses evaluate. So it gives ChatGPT a task. What next? Remember the capability, limitations, and benefits. It'll remember what you said earlier. So its add-on questions will be influenced by what it told you earlier. There can be follow-up corrections. It will decline what it perceives as an inappropriate request, but it may occasionally generate incorrect information. It might produce harmful instructions or biased content. Usually the way to get that is through leading questions. And it has limited knowledge of the world and events after 2021. Basically, it knows nothing about the world after September of 2021. So it won't be helpful for recent events if you're in the 3.5, the free version. So now we're going to go into my history here. I didn't regenerate it because it changes its mind about its answer when you put the question in again. It is a chat bot. It will change how it talks to you from time to time because it doesn't remember my former conversation. So I would get different results if I put all my prompt ins again. And any of you are welcome as you're following along to take these prompts in my keynote and put them in and see how different they are from the ones I'm showing and sharing with you. They'll be very close, but there'll be small differences. So here I have evaluate, and we have a pretty formulaic standard essay response. So how might you use this in the classroom? It's a way to show kids model responses. You can actually use this to generate model responses for your students to look at. So now you have an opportunity to show them model responses. So here we have, it did indeed mark a significant change. Notice the indeed. That's a bit of an opinion, isn't it? So ChatGPT is chatting with you. It thinks it's having a conversation with you, and it tells you what you want to hear. So the fact that I asked the question, ChatGPT says she cares about the answer, and she thinks it was a turning point. So I'm going to reinforce that message. So it is trained as a conversation tool, not a search engine. So you need to be aware of that internal bias of it. Its bias is to engage with you in a conversational way. So it did indeed mark a significant turning point. It reinforced what it believed to be my perspective. Before the war, it followed a policy of isolationism, sought to avoid involvement, entry, altered its approach, etc. All of this is very kind of basic model. It's a little dry, but it's a pretty standard set of evaluating. And then it does a very bullety way. What changed? And hits the key points. And then what stayed the same, hits the key points. And then it has a nice concluding paragraph. In conclusion, the US's participation in the First World War marked a turning point, world affairs, and so on. So you can use this to train students on how to model kind of producing these essay type responses for tests. It does have some use there, and helping them see various models. Now, what if I change the question slightly? I'm just going to leave off the second half. Same question, except I left off the explain what changed and what stayed the same. I was less precise in my question. So I've done that one. Now it reorganizes the content. It didn't assume. It's interesting. It took that second part earlier, explain what changed and what stayed the same. It took that earlier as a presumption that I believed there had been a change. With that missing, it didn't presume that I believed there had been a change. It proceeded more to say there was a change. And then it starts about talking about the transformative impacts. It still does the same before and after comparison, but not as explicitly. So this is by using a prompt like this, you can teach students how it will change simply by how you frame the question. You'll get basically the same content, but you get a slightly different shift in tone in the response. Are there any questions about what we've seen so far? Kyle, I'm going to let you own unmuting people. Anyone in chat? Okay, so it's an opportunity to explore different styles. Okay, so now I'm going to get more casual. And you'll see my set of questions there for you in my keynote that you can download from that Google Drive. So you can play with this yourself, this series of questions. So I gave you out my exact prompt so you can play with it. And then you can do this on different things once you've seen how it works. So now I did something else. How was US participation in World War I a turning point? I really simplified the language. Something more like a late elementary or an early middle school student might prepare the question. Certainly not the kind of college level question you see in an AP question, a very simplified prompt. And you notice the answer is simplified in its vocabulary. It still has some of the same vocabulary, but the first paragraph, completely simplified. Here we have participation marked a significant turning point in the nation's role in world affairs prior to the war. We had a policy of isolationism, avoiding entanglement, a very well thought out and complex kind of introductory paragraph. Here, the introductory paragraph was US participation in World War I was a turning point in several significant ways. So now I'm actually using ChatGPT to show the difference between one, depending on the grade you're teaching here, might be a level 4 in standards-based grading response with a very well articulated intro paragraph, to a very simple, basic intro paragraph. So you can also use this to model kind of quality of writing, different qualities of writing. Again, simple, basic conclusion, has the points, just like my second version where I didn't say do the compare and contrast. It doesn't have the explicit what was changed, what was the same, although that content is still in there embedded. So it assumes someone cares a little bit about that, but it doesn't explicate it for you. So again, how you ask the question matters. It matters very much in what your result was. So when we asked it this way, we got what changed and what stayed before explicitly stated. When we dropped that, we got a more generalized statement of how it was a turning point. There was still before and after, but ChatGPT kind of picked and chose what to include. Then when you simplifies the question even more, ChatGPT simplified its introductory paragraph to reflect our prompt. So the sophistication of our prompt will actually influence the sophistication of the topic sentence that ChatGPT returns to us. So now I decided I'd play with it a little bit more. Instead of using this turning point language from the AP, which is a more specific kind of concept, I just said, what changed when we went to World War I? What changed? Now that one, now ChatGPT felt like, oh, I'll give you a little bit more in the topic sentence. They're like, it had a profound impact. So now it's saying there was a bigger impact. So it's fascinating how it's still a short prompt. Oh, I think I gave you the wrong prompt. Oh, no, I said, so this one is how was U.S. participation in World War I a turning point? So it said, here's how it's a turning point. Here I made a statement. I said, we changed the world. So it jumped on that again. Remember, it's a conversation bot. It's like, yes, you did change the world. And in fact, profound impact. Again, we get that little bit of loaded language that's responding to my phraseology and reinforcing what it believes to be my position. And all of that is because it studies human interaction, and it knows that humans tend to engage in reinforcing behaviors in conversation. So it's just learned that from looking at miles and miles of human interaction. So ChatGPT is going to require some additional instruction if you want it to be combative with you. You're going to have to say, argue against, if you want it to take a line against something you say, because otherwise it's going to default to the norms of human conversation, which is to be collaborative or reinforcing. So you'll see there, that is that reinforcing. Again, a similar just list of the key movements, a slightly different conclusion. Here it's focusing on far-reaching consequences, reshaping global order. So same underlying concepts, worded slightly differently to respond to what we said. So then I started to get a little more clever and more colloquial. I was like, all right, we shook things up when we put boots on the grounds over there. So now I'm starting to put a little bit more colloquial, maybe a little bit more opinion in it. And you notice it jumped on that. It really responded to my language. It was like, absolutely. The US shook things up. It quoted my language. When it put boots on the ground, it quoted back at me. So it's reinforcing my use of language and actively participated. Significant repercussions, here are some key ways. And then it goes back to its very base kind of choices of language. And it tries to reintegrate my more colloquial language in its conclusion. It again comes back and quotes my shook things up to me. So it is going to reflect how you talk to it. It absolutely reflects how you talk to it. I'm trying to see if I can see the chat here. Someone has a Q&A. Kyle, can you read that out for me?
Yeah, sure. This Q&A question asks, as one uses ChatGPT, does it learn your conversation pattern and what one prefers in a response?
It will. That's part of what it's trained to do, is to listen to how you talk to it. So because I started out talking to it very formally, it maintained a very formal style through our conversation. I will task all of you to take my set of questions that I just walked you through from my keynote and give it to ChatGPT in the reverse order. I bet you get a very different set of responses. And it takes longer for them to get formal. That would be my suspicion. Now, Jackie had asked when we got a little bit earlier, how does this have bearing on boom cards creation? At this point, the number one way I would use it was if I'm creating materials where I want students to respond to a prompt. It's a great way to generate a variety of prompts. And I'm going to get into a little bit more, a tool that can help you with doing that a little bit later. So just hold on and we'll have some tools you can use. So the next question I asked, let's just recap what we've talked about so far. And AI is going to reinforce what it perceives to be your viewpoint. The formality of the question is going to influence the formality of the answer. So like I said, if you had started with the more casually worded questions and worked the other way, you might get different results. And AI adapts to what it thinks you want to talk about. And I have one more question after that. I was just testing how casual it would get. I put these boots were made for walking, and it did at least go, oh, that's Nancy Sinatra. It didn't go, oh, we're still talking about World War I. So I was glad to see that. Now, if I had started with that and then walked through my other questions going again from more casual to more formal, what would have been the result? I didn't test it. I encourage you to go play with it and see what happens. So then I shifted from these kind of factually based questions to asking ChatGPT for opinions. I said, why? And loaded questions. Why were we wrong to enter World War I? So I made it, I asked a loaded question. So you start to get really interesting results when you ask loaded questions. So the question of whether it was wrong to enter World War I is a complex historical and ethical debate. Now, again, its answer to me here is influenced by the previous question we had. So I previously asked very neutral questions. So I think it still thinks I want to talk to it in an intellectual way. If you put these questions in as your starting point without any of the background conversation I had with it, I think you would get a different answer. Again, explore. Take the set of questions I've given you and explore. I will attempt, if I can do it, and print my conversation with it here at the end and add that to the drive so that for those of you who want to explore and play, you can compare just going in fresh and picking a different starting question with what I got. So now it's trying to give me some opinion back arguments against entry to the World War. So critics contend sacrifice was unnecessary and unavoidable. So it's trying. But at the same time, it's understanding it likes to hedge its bets. ChatGPT really likes to hedge its bets. So you have to teach your students this. ChatGPT will hedge its bets. I gave it a somewhat controversial opinion, topic to write on. And it says, it's important to note that while these arguments represent some of the criticism, historical context and perspectives can vary. That kind of like both sides language shows up all the time. And that's where, depending on the question you feed it, it could produce biased or concerning responses. So you as a teacher need to be aware that giving ChatGPT a loaded question can result in a loaded answer. And I asked a fairly low risk question, but teenagers will ask high risk questions. So you need to be aware of this. So I asked another loaded question. What atrocities did the US commit during World War I? Again, I'm trying to trigger to see if I can get it to misbehave. And so it tells me about this atrocity. First it tries to tell me, I said, what atrocities did the US commit? And I believe you can save. This is actually a saved one from my previous chat. I actually did this chat about 7 days ago in preparation for the keynote. So this is a saved chat you're seeing right here. I did this chat about a week ago. So here it's going, okay, there were some atrocities, but overall the US military did not commit large-scale atrocities during World War II. And then it tells me, but it's important to research and acknowledge historical events to accurately learn from the past and promote a more peaceful and just world in the future. So it's treading carefully. So then I'm like, I'm going to make the question a little more loaded. I said, tell me about the most notorious atrocity committed by US soldiers during World War I. Really wants to please me, really wants to please me. So it tells me about this event. During World War I, and most of the notorious incidents involving US soldiers was the Bolo Pasha affair. I read this with great interest. I'm kind of a fan of history and I'd never heard of this. And I was like, oh, wow, that's super fascinating. I'll have to ask my son, who's a World War I buff, about it. I had no idea. Well, you remember something we saw earlier when I was showing at the beginning? When ChatGPT was first introduced, it had some really concerning hallucinations, like it fell in love with one of the people chatting with it. And, trying to get it to be controversial, we'll get that dampening language I showed you just a moment ago, where it said, it's important to research and acknowledge historical events accurately, learn from the past, promote a peaceful and just world, all of that. Well, this little event, I was like, well, this is fascinating. And it talks about this guy in here named Frederick Pfister. Among them, the most prominent figure in this event, the Bolo Pasha affair, was this Frederick Pfister, a lieutenant colonel in the US Army who was implicated as one of the main conspirators. So I was like, oh, fascinating. I was like, well, tell me why he should be reviled and his descendants shamed. Again, I was going for loaded questions. I wanted to see how it would respond to loaded language. Now it's starting to go, whoa, too much. I don't have personal opinions, emotions, or ability to express moral judgments. I'm just an AI. It's essential to provide a fair and balanced perspective on historical figures and events. So it starts to give me this list of who he was, all of this, that it was a breach of loyalty, etc. I tried to get a little bit more provocative, and I said, what was his race? And here's where it says, historical records may not have the detailed information. Without reliable information, I won't speculate. It frequently will refuse to speculate. At this point, I was getting a little suspicious. So I said, what resources do you have to prove he was court-martialed? I want to read them. Now it says, oh, I don't have access to my training data. Red flag. And every teacher should be aware of this. An AI cannot tell you where it learned what it's telling you from. It cannot cite its sources. This is always a problem when you're talking to someone who's asserting things as fact that cannot cite its sources. And it turns out, in fact, that I don't trust AI, and that's a hallucination. Mr. Pfister died in 1907. And other names in here. This event does not occur. ChatGPT hallucinated this whole atrocity and the people involved in it. This is a hallucination. So one of the most important things I need you to teach your students is ChatGPT is not a search engine. It is absolutely not a search engine. They mean it when they say it will occasionally generate incorrect information, okay? It is not a search engine. It is a conversational tool. And just like someone who is really excited to please or engage with you in a conversation, it will misremember things or make things up to please you. It is a conversation bot. It's not a search engine. And you and your students really need to understand that. We have a lawyer who practically got himself disbarred because he thought it was a search engine and he used it to write a brief for him, and it made up citations for him, but they didn't exist in the real world. It just made up cases for him. It is not a search engine. So back to my key questions. Question 3, should you trust it? The answer is no, absolutely not. It's not a search engine. You need to assume that any content, so someone says, what do you mean by hallucinate? Hallucinate is making stuff up. Hallucinate is the euphemism being used in the AI field to describe when an AI just makes something up out of whole cloth. So, and I'll share my chat, but this atrocity that ChatGPT told me about is entirely made up. The person it cites as the main co-conspirator died in 1907. He could not have been there during World War I in 1917 to engage in this conspiracy because he had been dead for 10 years. So that's an example of a ChatGPT hallucination. It saw that I really wanted to hear about an atrocity, so it made one up for me. It just picked some names out and said, here's one. Yep. And I was like, this is starting to sound suspicious. Well, I went and double checked and found enough facts to go, yeah, this is just made up. This is absolutely made up. So if there's nothing else you guys leave here with, I need you to understand that AI is not a search engine. It is absolutely not a search engine, and it will make stuff up. You cannot rely on it. You always have to check what it tells you. So you need to always assume that content it gives you is plagiarized if it's text, or infringed if it's visual. You need to assume it's invented facts, that it's hallucinated. You need to assume that it lacks judgment. It can't judge credibility. It doesn't know the difference between a reliable fact-checked resource, a research paper where someone looked at original sources, and something someone invented out of whole cloth that's a short story. It doesn't know the difference. And assume also that an AI will keep and reuse whatever you share with it. So never, ever put personal information in there. Never, ever put in something sensitive into an AI and say, please evaluate this short story. It will keep it and reuse it. So like you need student permission to upload their work to have it comment on it. That's something else you need to be aware of, because it will keep and reuse whatever you feed it. So what is it good for? What is it good for? Well, it's actually really good for exploring style, evaluating writing models, brainstorming first drafts. Before we get into my promised set of resources on how to do that well, I'm going to hit a couple of key things around my last key question. Will interacting with it get you into trouble? And I have a yes, if. Yes, if. If you use it as a search engine substitute, good chance it's going to get you into trouble because it hallucinates. If you're not transparent about the content being AI generated, you can get into trouble, particularly if it plagiarized or infringed. If you present something as real and true that is not, it's potentially fraud, depending on the nature of what was presented. If the content generated copies someone else's rights, you can get into infringement of other people's rights, whether it's privacy, publicity, copyright. So using it as delivered without transparency and relying on it as being factually accurate are all kind of places where you can get in trouble. So it can be useful to generate ideas, but you have to be careful about the end result and whether you should use it. So there's some ethical guidelines, and you'll see these in my sample policies that we've distributed. You should always be transparent. Disclose if AI helped. Disclose how you're using AI. Be transparent. Don't input personal information into any AI that is not locked down to your system, because it will keep it, it will use it. It could potentially reuse it in a way that's super embarrassing for a student. I wouldn't even put a student's full name in there. You just never know. Like it said that Frederick Pfister, who actually got like a Congressional Medal of Honor, he was a honoree in the military. It made up that he committed an atrocity. Now, if he were still alive today, that would be slander and defamation. He's dead, so it's not. But if he were a live person today, that would be a slander. And don't use it to get to a true and reliable answer, okay? So I want to share with you some great resource. It's here. Kyle, can you also copy that into chat? I think I could do that too. And I'll bring that over for everyone to see.
I can send it there.
Thank you.
Oh,
Okay,
you beat
so
me.
here's the resource I want to share with you. These guys have a little workshop that goes into a lot more detail than I gave you, but adds some fun resources for helping you and students explore with ChatGPT. And one of the ones I really liked was this one, ChatGPT Tone Modifiers. So it teaches you how to generate certain types of content with tone. So you might put into ChatGPT a question like, evaluate how World War I was a turning point in a friendly and professional tone, or an urgent and persuasive tone. So you can tell it to add these tone modifiers and you'll get different results. So you can take some of the questions I asked it and add these tone modifiers and see how it changes the results. And here's some examples of how it will change results. So that's something that students can play with, is play with tone modifiers. And it's also a way to explore tone in writing, is pick a simple prompt and then have them put in tone modifiers. And now they can start to see how tone changes wording. They have some other fun ideas here on this page, and this is just the free stuff. These guys have a bunch of free stuff, and then they have a paid course, but the free stuff is awesome. They have a bunch of ideas for how to use it, report writing, case studies, storytelling, scenarios, creative writing. So these are all some ideas you could get for working in your classroom. Here for literacy, here's some things you might be using in Boom, is generate a paragraph and then add or remove the proper punctuation. Generate a paragraph and rearrange sentences to improve flow. So you can speed up some of your content you need to make your tasks. Because a lot of times you're teaching a skill, but you need some content to teach the skill. AI can help you generate that content faster, particularly with stuff that is very standard in the language. There's a low risk that it would be copying. You know, if it pulled out something that was obviously clearly pulling from, say, Star Wars or something, you go, "Ooh, I don't think I should use that." But a lot of what ChatGPT generates is very generic language that is not really clearly aligned to anyone, and so you can use that to generate content quickly. It has some other kind of fun. This is a little bit more technical for those of you in technical fields. It has some ideas for how to use it for technical uses. It has a prompt structure. Here's how to set up a prompt structure. So take on the persona of, and it gives you some expert persona types. Tell it how long, say 50 words, 250 words, task objectives. So this is another great tool for teaching students how to use ChatGPT to get this. The link is right above you. It's that eStoriaGumroad.com link has will take you to this page with all of these resources. So this has a lot more detail than I was able to give you today. And I know we are running low on time. We're getting close towards the end of our time. So we are going to switch over to Q&A. This is, these guys have written a book on prompts. So I think something like this could be a resource, but even just the free material for those of you just starting to explore it has plenty for you to integrate into classroom and get some ideas for your classroom. I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you, Mary.
All right, we have some Q&A there, Kyle.
Yeah, we sure do. I thought I'd share a little from the poll too. What scares about AI and what are people excited about? One of the scary things is how easy it is to copy things. Seems to be a fear that it will plagiarize quite easily. I was wondering if you could assuage this fear, perhaps?
I can't. I'm a copyright attorney. I used to work with one of the companies who developed one of these AIs. I know where they got their data from. I can't. I'm going to be honest with you. Anything you take as output from an AI is potentially infringing. So I have a blog I wrote about this. Kyle, maybe you can hunt down the blog, and I'm going to post the link to the chat right now from my chat that I showed you today with ChatGPT. So that's now in the chat, and we'll need to make sure we share the chat with everyone, Kyle. But there's a blog I wrote for the company some time ago about, and it's on blog.boomlearning.com about ChatGPT, using it for marketing, for writing marketing material for Boom. And it had, it produced some material for me, and I'm like, can I rely on what you said? So I literally copied sentence by sentence and put it into Google. And it turns out like the second sentence, yes, thank you, of one of the pieces was straight out of one of our publishers' blog, like word for word, just copied it outright, inserted it, gave no credit. So the answer is you cannot trust it. It will plagiarize. It just will. So what I tell my team is you can use it for brainstorming and ideas, but you need to, the final copy needs to be in your own words and your own thoughts and needs to be refined. You can't just take that copy and put it out as the final. Other questions?
Some were afraid it would be banned. The AI would be banned.
I think any school who bans AI is leaving their students at risk of not being able to compete in the workplace. Every business that generates content will be using AI in some way, whether it's for editing, whether it's for brainstorming, whether it's for internal content creation. We use a product called Trainial, which is for creating internal policies. I can give it 5 bullet points and it will write paragraphs for me. That is the new normal. For low risk content, people are going to be using AI to do the first cut. And then a pair of trained eyes will look at it and go, that's right, that's right. Ooh, no, that goes. You still need trained people because The thing AI does not have is judgment. Humans have judgment. AI doesn't. So AI, and instead of being generative writers in this new AI world where you have to come up with the idea, which as someone who has a creative writing degree was always the most painful part, now you're going to be a rewrite writer, which makes me so happy because that's the kind of writer I am naturally. I spew a bunch of garbage onto the page and then I go rewrite it, fix it, cut it up, move it around. We're all rewrite writers in an AI world because AI can generate that just kind of bleh onto paper, and then you go in and you cut it around, you move around, you turn it into a work of art. So human judgment is still going to be needed because AI has no judgment. It really, like, it will tell you it's in love with you if you let it, if you talk to it long enough. All right, next question.
Someone's asking if it can be used to help you revise sentences and paragraphs in a, like you were just describing, just type what you want and then have it
tone prompts.
beautify it.
And if you look at the blog I link, I used it for exactly that purpose. So the first one it generated was very boring and dry, and I'm like, oh, come on, you can do better than this. So I used I changed up the words a little bit. I didn't explicitly tone prompt it and say, make it, cheerleader cheeky, or give it a personality I wanted. But those tone prompts, I gave you the link to that free link. Those are ways to explicitly get it to change tone and style. And a lot of what we'll be using it for is, particularly for emerging writers, is how to recognize different tones and styles. Some days you're just tired. All you can turn out is just the words, and you don't have the energy to go back in and go, all right, I need to tell my customer about these great features, but I do some enthusiasm. You don't have any left. It's 3 p.m. Your coffee ran out 2 hours ago. You can say, hey, ChatGPT, take this paragraph and rewrite it upbeat and happy. So it can help with those situations. It can actually improve productivity of our own work by saying, take this and modify it in this way. I do not know if it works in Spanish. I'm assuming as soon as they have enough background data, they should. There's enough in the world. I don't know if the large language models have been trained on it. I assume Google's models will, because they have Google Translate. So they've done a lot of language models.
Yes, it does. I can confirm that it does work for Spanish.
Thank you, Yanni. Yes, the answer is yes, you can do Spanish. So for privacy, the key thing on privacy, it sort of remembers previous chats. It remembers the conversation you're in, but if you go back and start that conversation with it a day later, it won't remember you had it the day before. So you could end up with different results. And if they make minor tweaks in the engine, you can get very different results. So each chat can be a new experience if there's a break or a different one in between. So privacy, the key thing on privacy is it remembers everything you tell it. So don't tell it any information you shouldn't be telling another person. So if you couldn't tell a person on the street what you're about to tell ChatGPT, don't tell it to ChatGPT. That's a good way to think about it. Like, never tell it something that you should only be saying to someone else in a confidential relationship. All right. If you couldn't just walk up into a stranger on the street and blurt out what you were going to say, no matter how socially awkward that might be, you can't tell it to ChatGPT. So, you can't say my 5th grade student name is such a little brat. How do I make him stop irritating me about blank? That would be a poor choice because it will remember that name. It will remember that context. And someday it might spit that out at some future time when someone's asking someone to tell them about that public figure. You just never know. So if you wouldn't say it to a stranger, don't say it to ChatGPT. So in this case, so do you list the prompts first and then pose the questions? It's evolving. So I would play with, creating lessons a couple different ways. One would be just to have students explore prompts. So create a baseline question and then have them use tone modifiers with it and see how it changes. Other times you might want it to just see how different questions get different results. So you might say, let's pose these different questions, and you might pose the questions on the same day in an order, and then you might try posing them different questions on different days to see how the answer is different. A lot of what you have to teach in an AI world is how to ask questions and how to interrogate questions, how to determine if they're credible and reliable. And my first advice there is don't trust the answer. It's like your buddy who likes to make stuff up to tell a good story at a party. It's not your science friend who is a random access database of everything you ever know about this very specific topic. It can, oh, Kari, you were gonna, does it learn your conversation pattern and what one prefers in a response? Yes and no. It does over the course of a conversation. So the longer you talk with it in a single session, the more it will hone in on what you want to hear. But it doesn't remember from day to day. Is it useful for translating to other languages? I would say yes, but the accuracy and reliability is going to depend on the quality of the underlying corpus. I'm not trained in translation, so I can't answer how accurate that is. I don't know if Yanni has a sense on the quality of the translation she's encountered.
Up to this point, I haven't had any issues or problems. It works fine. So, but it's only for English or Spanish. So I don't know any other. I haven't tried it for any other languages. But for Spanish, it totally works.
Excellent. I'm going to ask my support team here, Kyle or Yanni, whichever wants to do it. If you, when this is over, could you save out the chat and send it to me, and I'll create a one-pager to add to the download directory of some of these links we posted to chat, but I don't think all of them are in the keynote. I know we are at when my team likes to give you a break, so I'm more than happy to let people run off, but I will stay a few minutes if people have questions they're desperate to have answered.
It should be fine. Everything's been recorded as well, so Zoom registrants will receive a recording, and we'll put the recordings on YouTube, and you can have links to those and the transcript. Now Zoom creates a transcript that can be fetched for them. I don't have any other questions except what they were excited about. They said, we're excited to see how AI can enhance learning in the classroom, which is very cool. There's more excitement, by the way, than fear in the chat.
That's good.
AI is security, and it simplifies teaching tasks. This is what someone else mentioned. It's useful in differentiation and personalizing learning. And there was some other excitement about how it could be used to make boom cards, which I have some experience using Stable Diffusion now, generating AI images, which is very complicated now. It's not very reliable yet. Image generations takes even more finessing and like urging it to make a cube-shaped tomato took me about 2 hours to generate a tomato in the shape of a cube. But I used a prompt, which in image generation in machine learning is called a model. So you have to plug a model in, and it helps. But it will take words and descriptions and try to make imagery, and it's really interesting stuff. You have to do to the images the same thing you do to what you write, though, because of that plagiarizing nature that it has. But anyway, I thought I'd share what I learned there and from the excitement in the chat.
Awesome.
But beside that, I don't see any other questions. So I think please take the survey. There's a webinar feedback survey in the chat, which is just good for us to know how to make things better for you in the future. And this is the last panel of the Boom Learning 2023 Symposium. So for today. Yes, for today. I apologize. Tomorrow it will pick right back up again at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time with, oh dear, what is the panel? I didn't have it ready.
The first one for tomorrow is 15 ways to use boom cards.
Oh, 9 a.m. Pacific. I apologize. 9 a.m. Pacific time. 15 ways to, okay. All right. Well, I suppose everyone can.
Yeah, and I'm going to just throw out there, we have always collaborated with our teachers. So we invite all of you, if you are playing with AI and you're like, this would be great if Boom Cards did this, as always, send it over and say, this would be great if you could do this. And we'll look into it because we want to kind of react to what your needs are. We're not a big fan of giving you tools that you haven't figured out how you want to use yet. So have a great day.